How does a poor Croatian immigrant turn $600 into a multi-billion-dollar fortune? Blackjack, horse racing and advantage staking are the answer. Welcome to the most secretive rags to riches tale you've never heard before. This is the story of how an elusive punter known as Zeljko Ranogajec, the Joker, and John Wilson has outsmarted governments, betting companies and the everyday punter for almost 50 years. And he's still doing it today. It'll blow your mind and just maybe change your betting strategy forever. This notoriously secret mastermind was born in the city of Hobart, Australia back in 1961. Being the son of Croatian immigrants, his early life experiences were somewhat underprivileged. However, he more than made up for that with solid work ethic and natural show of intelligence. By 1979, the hard work had paid off, earning him a scholarship at the University of Tasmania, where he studied tax, finance and banking. The fixation on efficiency, numbers and wealth had already begun. While studying, he worked at the Rebate casino in Hobart. On learning that card counting in blackjack was frowned upon, it piqued his interest. Within months, he taught himself how to card count, stuffing his pockets full of Aussie dollars. Before long, he was making more from playing blackjack on his break than the casino were paying him. The attention it gained was a double-edged sword though. It introduced him to a cute blonde, his future wife, Shelley Wilson, but also cost him his job with a permanent ban from West Point. Shortly after, he moved to New South Wales so he could carry on studying at university while systematically hitting casinos that didn't recognise him yet. You probably guessed it already, but he was making too much money and binned university off before finishing his degree. By the early 1980s, he'd formed a relationship with David Walsh and Alan Woods, other well-known card counters. He may have even crossed paths with Bill Benter too, but that's a different mind-blowing story for another day. He flew to Vegas several times a year to count cards but wanted more. By 1984 he was banned from almost everywhere. He was even kicked out of Jupiter's casino on the Gold Coast on the day of opening. The former head of security recalls that they'd got a handwritten file identifying Zeljko, also known as the Joker, warning that he was a successful card counter. Much like modern bookmakers' algorithms, they used systematic checks to ban winners. He realised things had to change, so he refocused his attention, which is where the story starts to get seriously tasty. He first gained a reputation in the world of gambling when word got out that one individual was putting enormous amounts of cash through the tab at the Vulcan pub in Sydney. For non-Aussies, the tab is a pari-mutuel betting system in Australia. Like the tote in the UK, it's a type of pool betting. It wasn't long before the pub was turning over the highest wagering in the whole of Sydney, which is where the Croatian Aussie decided to buy the pub. Maybe he was trying to keep his betting activity under the radar and out of the public view, I don't know. A few years later, it emerged that Zeljko and his friend David Walsh were also believed to be the winners of 40 out of 44 Keno jackpots in the 1990s, all were won within 18 months, with many of the bets placed at another small pub called the Wagon and Horses in Hobart. It was reported that $64 million was bet in cash by the pair. If you're unaware, Keno is a lottery-style gambling game. Name comes from French Latin roots meaning 5 winning numbers. In 1994, he set the Keno jackpot of $7.5 million at the North RSL club. Presumably things hadn't gone to plan for the 33-year-old, as he'd actually wagered more than he won in order to win it. Now, this is just a hunch, but I would presume that all the outside attention was starting to play on Zeljko's mind, because in December 1997, the alias John Wilson first appeared on some corporate documents, where he took the surname of his wife, Shelley. Now, investigative journalists for the Daily Mail and Sydney Morning Herald have both tried to identify and pinpoint Zeljko's net worth and trace his main residence, although its extremely private nature and use of different names makes it difficult for them to pinpoint. Even his wife and daughter are extremely private, sometimes using alternative aliases. In 2018, a feature by the Daily Mail shares pictures of an extremely lavish lifestyle where he owns many properties, one of them situated in the prestigious Knightsbridge postcode in One Hyde Park, where flats are traded for as much as £75 million. That's $243 million. A look into Zeljko's taxes could potentially clear up how much profit he's made. The only problem though is that gambling winnings aren't taxable under Australian law, so there's no official record. He did briefly break his silence when asked about his multi-billion-dollar net worth to say it's just a big exaggeration. He also opened a Twitter account in 2015 where he replied to a couple of my direct messages, but more on that in just a moment. In June 2000, Betfair's exchange was born and Zeljko's attention was turned once more. It's reported that he was responsible for 33% of all Australian horse racing bets on Betfair's exchange and 5% of the outlay on the Aussie Totes in 2003. A mind-blowing feat in itself, even before you consider the next part of this story. The early 2000s were a source of controversy for Zeljko, or John Wilson as he was known in the following court cases. The Australian Tax Office had repeatedly looked into Zeljko's betting to determine if he needed to pay tax on his winnings. They thought that maybe his activities should be taxed because he was making a living from gambling. Originally, they failed to prove he was running any type of business under the header of gambling. They reopened the case in 2008 though, getting Zeljko and his business partner David Walsh to settle in 2012. The deal was confidential and only applicable to activity between 2004 and 2011. Therefore, no information regarding Zeljko's profits was released publicly. However, the real eye-opener come when discussing rebate deals that Zeljko had with Tabcorp. Now, due to the volume of bets he was placing, Tabcorp had agreed a special rebate agreement which gave him a massive advantage. It's anticipated that Tabcorp were giving him a rebate for as much as 8 to 10% on bets. As he once explained to the courtroom, it's simple. If you bet $100 and lose $5, but you get 10% rebate, you still make 5%. If you bet very large and it's a pari-mutuel pool, you depreciate it so far that you end up getting under fair odds. So if you fix something at $8, you get 6, but if you get a rebate, it puts you into the positive. How much does a syndicate turn over per year? The magistrate asked. My guess would be $1 billion, he answered. This special agreement is how Zeljko had become responsible for 6 to 8% of Tabcorp's annual betting revenue. To reiterate, with a 10% rebate, he only had to earn $95 for every $100 that he bet in order to come out with $5 profit. But I suspect he knew these investigations were coming long before they happened, as the Australian Financial Review reported to have obtained a document that revealed that as early as 2003, Zeljko's Punters Club were concerned about being interrogated by the tax authorities. It suggests that if members were asked about winnings, they should say no records were kept, therefore it's difficult to estimate turnover or profit, and would prefer not to make a guess. The Financial Review also reported that some of the syndicate members to be part of the founder management team at Betfair. Interesting when you consider that Zeljko is rumoured to be the largest liquidity provider on Betfair's exchange, which makes you wonder, does he pay the £250,000 tax on winners that Betfair charges? You can find out more details about that in the end screen or the link descriptions down below this video. Since these brushes with the tax authorities, he relocated his operation to the Isle of Man tax haven, where he works as a consultant named as John Wilson. The company is described as a sports event and international racing company that employs mathematicians, data analysts and racing observers. Once various pools and jackpots reach a certain threshold, advantage bets are struck. Now, Zeljko's net worth is unconfirmed and carries plenty of speculation. The Australian Daily Telegraph claimed to have spoken with an unnamed relative who said he's a multi-billionaire, although the Financial Review estimated his net worth to be $610 million earlier in 2021. It's hard to know for sure as there's so little evidence in the public domain, although it's fair to say he's made that original $600 go quite a long way. He regularly gives money to the Humpty Dumpty Foundation, who provide essential medical equipment for children's hospitals. Presumably that cause means something to him personally. Now, in 2011 it was a busy year for Zeljko as he was inducted into the Blackjack Hall of Fame, and Tote Tasmania shined the light of controversy on him. A year later in 2012 he was named as the leader of a gambling syndicate that had profited considerably from the rebate arrangement with the Tote Tasmania Limited, leading to the state-owned company to close down. The favourable deal allowed his syndicate to earn around $52 million over 3.5 years, betting on US horse races alone. Only around 15% of this amount came from the actual winnings, whilst the other 85% was due to rebates. Tote Tasmania themselves got in trouble based on the rebate agreement that they'd agreed with Zeljko. And the Treasurer of Tasmania eventually sold the state-owned company on. Now, in 2015, an account appeared on Twitter, which, as I remember at the time, had a few people concerned at a well-known betting company. Presumably, as the biggest contributor to their product, he'd got them in a bit of an awkward position. The profile picture was of a Lamborghini in front of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, with the bio stating, allegedly, the world's biggest punter and high-stakes professional gambler. Since then, the account has disappeared, although I recall sharing a handful of messages with the account about Betfair's premium charge. Responses were carefully worded, although the account hinted that it was likely that specialist commission deals could be made if betting volumes were high enough. I've no idea how much truth there is to this, although I don't believe there is anything that legally stops online exchanges from offering favourable terms to high-stakes professional customers. From a business perspective, it's quite understandable that customers who provide significant exchange liquidity may be given favourable commission terms and reduced in-play betting delays. However, like the additional £250,000 super tax that Betfair imposes on consistent winners, it's unlikely that the average punter will ever find out, unless they start paying it, or unless somebody who does decides to make a video about it, like this one here in the end screen. Thanks very much for watching. If you found this video interesting, please remember to tap the like button down below and consider subscribing to the channel.